We are really wanting to look now. We've talked about what a learning environment is, okay? You know, this idea of a dynamic ecology, something that learners configure for themselves, but also have configured for them by various institutions that they may engage with, and of course, by technology companies themselves. But still, we did not really yet ask this question of why? Why is it that particular technologies really get incorporated into learning environments, particularly by the learners themselves, by the users, let's say, because also, you know, teachers make decisions about why they use technology too. And we will start this investigation really with this lecture today. We will be looking at this notion of affordance, and if you do not know what that word means yet, we will certainly explore it over the next 20 minutes or so for sure. There is a paper on Blackboard which I'm not telling you to read, but it's recommended reading. In other words, it'll help you to read it and help you understand some of these ideas, because apart from the first page perhaps, it is quite a straightforward paper with lots of illustrations. Even if they might seem old, they are nevertheless good examples. And that's a point from Gaber. We will just run through some of the key points about what affordance is and why it matters. Got a nice video with a cute baby as well. It'll be fun. Okay. And then we're going to do this case study of the book. I hope at least some of you brought a book, because otherwise this will be a real short class. But we will look at the book as a technology. And if you don't think the book is a technology, by God it is. And I will show you plenty of examples going back 1,500 years of the book as something that developed over this time. The book is a technology that developed. It's not something that was invented all brand new one day in 710 AD. Right? Suddenly it was like, oh, everybody, we've got books now, we can use the text. It's not how it happened. We will tell something about this story, and you will look at books. You know, we will do this exercise where we really look at and examine the book as a way of, again, as I've said last time, stepping back from the technology and really asking, why is it designed the way it is? And what makes it useful? Because this is the key point. Things have to be useful. You can invent a technology, pour hundreds of thousands of dollars or yen or whatever into this, and still nobody wants to use it because it's not useful to them. On the other hand, really strange little things can prove to be useful, and we, you know, keep them around ourselves for years, and habits develop around them, practices and routines and so on. What we're mainly talking about today then is this usefulness at an individual level. Okay, what makes something useful to you? What makes something useful to a person, a user, a reader, a learner? But much of the rest of the block, we will be talking about this as a more collective point. So the point that technologies are also shaped by various social forces, including politics, economics, decision-making, the practices of institutions and of groups and communities themselves. All of that will come, you know, Friday this week and next week. And I will look, you know, at the end of the class, we will look forward to it. So, okay, a thought exercise. Please don't be reticent. This is not a right answer style question. Here is it. Oh, wrong one. See, I knew that one. I'm on this one. Right. A picture of a tree. That's a tree. We've all seen trees. They're still around. What makes a tree useful? Potentially. What can you do with a tree? You can do lots of things with trees. So what can you do with a tree? What makes a tree potentially useful? Water? As in?
What makes a tree useful? Sorry. Its branch can help us to cover the sunshine.
Right. It's a hot sunny day. You're out in the middle, you know, you're doing a walk. I did a really hot walk in July and it was really hot and I loved it. Trees, shelter. Number one. They produce oxygen, yes. And eat carbon dioxide to do it. So yeah, trees as a whole are extremely useful in that respect.
Absorbing water.
Absorbing water to make furniture, yes.
Fruit is eatable.
I didn't hear you.
Fruit.
Fruit, if it's the right kind of tree, it could produce tree. This particular tree used to stand in my garden, but we cut it down. And I like that picture too. No, it had to be cut down because it was absorbing all of the water. It was absorbing all the water and nothing would grow. So then we cut it down, things started to grow. Yeah, but you can make furniture with it.
Maybe that to animals.
Habitat for animals, yes. Things live in it. You can climb it if you want to see things, if you're so inclined, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Okay. The point is, though, context matters. And something like a tree, and as we will see shortly, something like steps, or something like this room, or something like Facebook or WeChat, it's not useful to everybody in the same way at the same time. Okay? It depends what your needs are at a given point in time, and whether also you have the capacity to make best use of that resource. Look, the tree in the middle there is a tree that stands outside a school in my hometown, Heaven Bridge, and it's always got something like that on it. People are constantly decorating it for whatever particular event is happening at the moment. Probably the kids in the school do it, actually. The creativity and the possibilities of simply decorating a tree are endless, depending on the context at a particular point in time. If you want to make use of that tree to make furniture, or indeed firewood. Nobody mentioned firewood, but sometimes you need stuff to burn if you're sitting outside and it's cold in the middle of the night. A tool like the thing on the left, the axe, would probably be helpful, or a chainsaw, or something anyway. Okay. And, physical capacities or creatures to make use of it. We said about things living in the trees. Well, that's a nuthatch, I believe, on the right. And they can do this kind of thing. And it's like, well, can you do that? No. Unless you're Spider-Man, we are not going to be able to do this kind of thing. We cannot make use of that affordance of the tree as somewhere to stand. That's basically what he or she is doing. Okay? And you can get very creative with all of this, particularly if you think of the tree as representing wood. There's lots of things you can do with wood if you're able to do it, but you can't do everything with a tree. Right? For example, you can't pick the tree up, walk around with it for a while, and then put it back where you found it, unlike a book. So the affordances of a particular thing are not infinite, but they are perceived. And this is the important thing. Affordances are a combination of innate capacities of a technology, whatever it is. The way that a technology has been built and designed, or like a tree, just an object. This doesn't apply only to, artificial objects like technologies or books, but it applies to trees. And as we'll see in a minute, applies to other features of a landscape. But also, it is a combination between this notion of how was something designed? What was it designed to do? What can it do innately? But also, what capacities can we perceive in it? Can we think of new and possibly interesting and creative ways of using this thing that we might not have perceived before, and indeed that the designers may not have perceived? We get examples of this will come up, but I'm going to show you the video on here because in theory this should work better with sound. So let's just watch this video, about 3 minutes. It's pretty good too. I like it.
Affordance is a perceptual relationship between functional properties of environments and skills of individual users. The simple design of this chair offers different affordances to different individuals. Exploring environments and learning affordances begins very early in life. Look at young Bennett. Having just learned to walk, he is still learning how his body allows him to interact with the world around him. For him, the chair is climbable. And because of his smaller size, it allows him to hide and crawl beneath it. Whoops. A young adult like Mundazar may not be able to crawl beneath this chair, but for him, it is standable, affording him the possibility of changing a light bulb. For this professor, the chair is sittable. providing a familiar resting place for reading. Behavior settings are bounded areas in space and time, and offer multiple affordances that, when perceived, support particular behaviors. This outdoor classroom provides an area that can afford different behaviors during the day. This morning, while it's empty, Bennett is able to expand his climbing skills previously learned on the chair. He has read the steps as climbable and is tall enough to do that on his own. Most likely, the designers did not consider this additional use. Later that morning, a class meets in the area. The steps that were just climbed upon now provide raked seating for students to listen to their professor. For the next hour, it is easily perceived as a seminar setting, and behaviors within the space are conducted as such. As the lecture ends, it's time for lunch. The area is no longer read as a classroom, but as a social area for everyone to enjoy each other's company and eat. The young ones have become restless. They run off towards the lawn next to where everyone is socializing. The kids now enjoy a separate behavior setting, one that affords running and exploration, behavior not appropriate where the others are eating and talking. If you look closely around you, you will begin to see how affordance and behavior settings affect the ways in which we interact with our surroundings and each other.
I think that's a great film. I really like that. Look at this point, a behaviour setting, okay? A setting for behaviour. As he said, bounded by place and time. We are in this room, right? Now, a whole lot of things have come together so that we can be in this room and I can use it to teach. It affords the practice of teaching. It affords certainly the practice of lecturing. Look, here I am. And here you are, all looking at me, right? It is no coincidence this is called a lecture theatre. Many of you have come from a media background and, you know, this idea of thinking about the appropriateness of a particular medium. Some things are appropriately watched in the theatre, like a rock concert, for example, you know. Would much rather watch a rock concert live with all the decent noise than I would on a little screen on my phone, you know, or a football match indeed. You know, all the seats at a football match are pointed towards the pitch because that's what you want to watch. Similarly here, we are in a behaviour setting which affords this kind of teaching. As we will see later, this is not an ideal room for the activity that we're going to try, you know, later. But I hope that I hadn't taught in them, but I hope you found and saw the difference with the tutorial rooms that you were in on Friday, where there's not necessarily an obvious front, where you can sit around the table. And it's just smaller. You know, it's a smaller and more intimate behaviour setting. It affords different types of behaviour than is possible in here. And it's not just the design of the room itself. You know, in a large and complex, very complex teaching institution like the University of Manchester, for a start, we need a room booking system. Okay? I mean, I didn't ask for this room. It's tolerable, but it's okay. I prefer the other room, the Friday room. But, you know, we had to have a room booking system that allows everybody really to know that EDUC 70141 itself part of a system, a code that identifies this class, this idea of a class and a course in the system. We can book this room. You all know to turn up here. You know, your attendance thing, if it works, is somehow coded and keyed to the same system. This technology, the fact that I can, you know, this room affords the possibility of doing two things on different screens. But other rooms do not necessarily. This one does. And all of these things have been designed into the system, but at the same time, one perceives all of the different possibilities that are inherent in the behaviour setting. As they showed you there, I mean, I don't think this would be a great place to have lunch, really. Well, I don't know, it's, you know, very cosy, really, is it? And it's so steep. I worry about falling down these stairs. We're getting old. Right? I mean, just imagine the baby going up there. We'd all be waiting for God to catch it. But that room, nice little classroom that they had there, afforded them to eat their sandwiches. It afforded a bit of opportunity for play. It afforded a kind of social, intimate classroom setting. It was in North Carolina state, I assume, and I've never actually been to North Carolina, but that's quite a way south in America, and the weather, I assume, is quite nice, particularly at certain times of year, unlike in the UK, although we're still doing all right. Trust me, it could be snowing by now sometimes. Well, all right, maybe. But anyway, climate is part of the whole thing. In a warmer climate, you will be more likely to have outdoor classrooms, etc., etc., etc. And on we go. The key point then about this idea of affordance, that something affords a possibility. I mean, if you've obviously learned English and the common use of the word afford is in terms of cost. I can afford it. I can afford that restaurant, or I can't afford that car, or whatever. But it is, it's all the same root word. It means to make something possible. And so technologies afford particular practices and behaviours and actions. They make them possible. And they are, as I said already, a combination of what features have been designed into a technology. All the things I've just said about the way that this room has been designed to afford the practice of lecturing. On the other hand, video conferencing, Zoom, that's actually Illuminate, but same idea. Video conferencing would make it possible for me to deliver teaching to people who are not in the room. I did my distance learning tutorials on Thursday night, and we had, Thursday during the day, we had people from based in Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok, various parts of the UK on the evening and so on. And this, I was at home, and I could not have done these things without the technology, but it afforded me the possibility of remote teaching. And of course, it's designed to do that. If not teaching, then at least meeting. But it is also about perception. And this really is the key point. If you don't perceive the affordance of a technology, if you don't notice that it can be used in a particular way, or if you try it and it doesn't work, or if you're just not feeling like there is a particular need at any point to use a technology for a purpose that you didn't perceive, or that it might not have been designed for, then you will never explore these new possibilities. And of course that happens a lot. I'm not saying that somehow people are deficient if they don't suddenly find 10 creative uses for a paperclip every morning. But it is important that this happens. I mean, I noticed this with online teaching. One of the differences between online teaching, even online lecturing, and this kind of thing is that it's very difficult to have a kind of audible background chat. It's rude, right? It's rude. I mean, you can get away with whispering if you're at the back, I'm sure. But you know what I mean? If you were to be heard, I'd probably get a bit annoyed and people would look around and go, okay, fair point. So, right, this room doesn't really afford this idea of background chat while the lecture is taking place. You could do it with technology, though. You might already be doing it, WeChatting each other, going, God, why am I here? The sun's shining. It's Tuesday morning. And on Zoom, or Illuminate, or Adobe Connect, or any one of these other video conferences, this is actually quite possible and actually quite interesting. And having had online lectures and run plenty of them, particularly during the COVID years, people using the chat box to type messages and whole different conversations can be happening that supplement the lecture or the conversation that is at least taking place audibly using our speakers and microphones in the Zoom chat. So while Zoom or these other video conferencing tools do have certain similarities and do afford behaviour that is similar to this lecture theatre. In other words, they do allow me to just drone on. They do allow me to show slides, for example. And I could have, I could have run that video. I mean, I did this lecture 2 years ago online and it worked fine. right? But it also affords actually different possibilities. It affords this idea of a background chat. It affords the idea of breakout rooms, for example. We'll split into groups in some ways later on, but it's not. It doesn't mean suddenly we're all in separate places, right? In Zoom, you can do that. However, there are also things that are harder on Zoom. I can't see everybody's face. You can't have 85 people using the chat at once. It just becomes silly. So, some things are easier, some things are harder. Another good example of this, by the way, is SMS text messaging. I realise SMS text messaging itself seems a bit outdated now, and we've all moved on to Messenger, WhatsApp, WeChat, and all these other things. But nevertheless, still do sometimes get an SMS message, and of course there was a time when everybody was all everybody was using this. But SMS text messaging was not designed into mobile phones in order that people could text each other. It was designed into phones initially so that you could get engineers could get test messages could be sent. You used to sometimes still. It's been a while since I've had one of these, but I put it this way though. Sometimes I've got Google Pixel 6 at the moment, and it sometimes tells me, look, I need to do an update. Right, probably a couple of days ago, it said you haven't updated your phone for 7 days. You used to get things that would say SIM update, or you could send test messages to them. This is why SMS messaging was designed into phones originally. And the group that found that it afforded them possibilities for using the phone that it had not done so before were the deaf. People who had hard of hearing or deaf, couldn't hear, realised that what they had with the SMS text messaging was a way that made the phone useful to them in a way it had not been when they couldn't, because they found it difficult to hear. So normally the using of the earphone was not useful to them. But SMS meant that you could send messages to people, and they also didn't need to be able to answer you immediately. It's asynchronous rather than synchronous. Again, if you're not sure about the difference, twig it, because it's important. Synchronous is communication that both people have to be in the same place at the same time. Synchronous means same time. Now, this is synchronous. A telephone call is synchronous. Zoom is synchronous. Right? Asynchronous is not at the same time. So email, text messaging, Facebook, Teams, these are asynchronous. You can post a message and have it read 5 seconds later or 5 days later. The message is still there. So SMS text messaging afforded the deaf a use of the technology that actually was both synchronous and asynchronous. If you're both texting each other at the same time, you know how it is. WhatsApp or whatever, you're online, and you might as well be having a text-based synchronous conversation. But at the same time, if one of you has to, break off the conversation because they've got to go to a class or, have their dinner, you can come back to it in half an hour and you're still going. And this was very useful for the deaf. They started to use it, and the practice spread until pretty quickly, really, it became something that the phone companies noticed people were using and so started charging us for it. Anyway, part of your plans. So this use of SMS text messaging evolved over time. And when we get onto the book, I'll show you some other things that evolved over time. All right, here's another great example. You know, Lego, right? Look, my wife's a big fan of Lego to the extent that a lot of this stuff is hers. The practices that Lego affords are becoming infinite. There's a show every year in Manchester. They usually have it. It's usually in June or July, called Bricktastic. I'm always taken to this because my wife. Well, I don't mind. Some of the things are cool. I mean, the stuff that you see in this show is just extraordinary. All of the things that you can do with it. What started out in about 1950, I think, as a Danish carpenter building these little bricks, all right? And just that was it. It started there. Lego is Danish for let's play, in case you didn't know. Well, it's from the words, anyway. And now you can do almost anything with this. I mean, this is that Lego figure on the right is about, it took obviously a couple of years ago. That's at least 5 foot tall, that figure. On the left, all of these toys. You've got Lego therapy. It's possible, right? People do this kind of thing. Lego therapy. It's like art therapy, but with Lego. Right, that is a picture, I believe. This was a whole exhibition of Lego where you had kind of historical scenes. That's supposed to be the Agora, the Democratic Forum of ancient Greece. You had Lego sculptures that can be really huge. You know, this picture of the people at the top. You know, somebody brought in a bunch of Lego, and we were using it to think through, to brainstorm ideas in a meeting at work. This is a few years ago. I mean, you know, there's the affordances that people have found for this basic idea of a plastic brick that can fit onto another plastic brick in various different colours is just extraordinary. And by the way, if you ever want to win a bet with a trivia question, the answer to the question, which company in the world makes the most tyres, okay, for cars, you know? It's not Dunlop or Goodyear, it is Lego. Okay, this is true. Lego makes more tyres by number than any other company in the world for its little vehicles. True fact. I said I would talk about Gaver's point. Gaver starts with his exploration of affordances, with a key point that this applies to really very everyday technologies. Like door handles. Okay, that's a bit cruel, that one, but hey, funny cartoon anyway, I think. All right, totally, you know, someone who's completely failed to notice that a door handle that you pull is not the same. I've seen people struggling with that door at the back because you haven't noticed that there's a button, right? But not on that door, right? Right, that door has a button that you can push, that one. Right? Pulling, you know, a door handle, look at the handle on the screen there, right? You would pull that. That's not a design that affords pushing. It's a design that affords pulling. But similarly, if the handle is just like you see there, right? Nobody would try to pull that door. Well, seriously. Right? You know, the simple thing about that door is that you look at it and you go, oh, that's got to be pushed. And this is all again in Gaver's paper, so have a look. I mean, I could show you now, but it would just be a bit of messing around. There's no reason to do so. But again, you're familiar, you know, some of you have got Apple, some of you have got PCs, but the basic idea of a scroll bar remains the same. If you've got what looks like a button on the screen, it's not an actual button. It's not a button like I have here. You're not actually pressing it. What you're doing is clicking on your mouse button. And it translates, you know, the software, the interface translates this notion that a click on the mouse button means that, you know, whatever's under the cursor, do something with it. If that thing looks like a button, then a button on screen affords its pressing. But it doesn't afford clicking and dragging, for instance, like a scroll bar does. Right? A scroll bar, we're all familiar with the idea now that it means that there's something above and below where we already were. So we can scroll up and down by clicking and dragging on the scroll bar, or of course for Mac users using your two fingers on the thing. And are you one of the 10% that does it my way, where you scroll down and it goes up, or are you one of the 90% who really confuse me, who've got it so you're moving down? Why would you have it that way, man? Right? I just don't understand it. Because I feel differently. I feel like that's more useful than the other way around. But it's, all of these things are becoming conventions that we are familiar with, but they're all based on this familiar idea of pushing, pulling, clicking, dragging. Our hand movements are translated into things on each screen. Right? Plenty in that paper. And as with the idea, I suppose, if you wanted to make use of the affordance of tree to build furniture, and you needed to have some kind of axe or chainsaw, not to mention, a sawmill probably, and lots of other technologies along the way, hammer and chisel and nails and so on. But nevertheless, you could turn a tree into a chair eventually. If you had all the necessary tools and you had all the necessary awareness of how to link all of these possibilities and these affordances in a chain. we you know how it is. You want to get a response from that button you clicked. You want to see something like that. You don't, you click on update, and this is my WordPress blog, one of them anyway. You click on update, and it turns to updating, and that's good because that feels like, oh yeah, I've actually have done something. You get clicks, little clicks on your phone, don't you, sometimes, or whatever. Oh, I don't know about you. If I'm putting my PIN number into a cash machine or whatever, you get a little bleep sometimes, but not always. And then I'm not always happy if I don't get the bleep. Or you need to see the little asterisks when you're putting in your password or your PIN number, right? So you know have you put enough characters in. All of these things help, right? They matter. They make this digital interface easier to use. They afford these possibilities. And if you take these ideas more broadly and thinking about the design of educational technologies more broadly and what makes them useful, it can be these little things can just be the helpful things sometimes. If you don't get a response of any kind, you wonder whether you've actually done what you thought you were supposed to be doing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. You click on it about 5 more times and then you realize that, you bought something 5 times. That's why it says never press refresh while you're doing this. Affordances can be, tasted and smelt. Okay? On the left, a really good meal. Trust me, that's the best restaurant I've ever eaten in, and it was highly expensive, but it was worth it. Only once I could afford it. This milk smells bad when it goes off because our body is saying, oh no, don't drink that. It's full of bacteria, nasty thing. And rotten meat smells awful, so you don't eat it. Right? And if you get a cake that comes out of the oven looking like that, you've done something wrong. This is feedback. This is an early illustration of what feedback is, right? Your cake comes out the oven looking like that, you did something wrong, and it's trying to tell you this. So, food and its texture and its taste and its smell, all of these things are part of it, and all of these things help us build up a picture of the resources around us in the environment and which ones are attractive and useful to us and which ones are not. And this applies just to technology as it does with anything else. You might not smell the affordances of technology, right? But then again, if these phones were just that little bit bigger, they wouldn't fit in our pockets. I know women pockets are not designed into your clothes often enough. My wife is always complaining about this thing. So fair enough, but I can put my phone in my pocket. If it was a bit bigger, I couldn't. If it was smaller, I would struggle to see it. It's got to be a certain size for me to be able to read it and use it. So there's a kind of optimum size for technology sometimes, and all of these things are important. Good design, therefore, good design of educational environments, good design of technologies generally, good design of just about anything. It's not just about, the content. It's not just about adding functionality upon functionality. It is about how well the users perceive a particular resource to be useful to them. Is it useful? Can I make use of this? Can I make use of this without spending 6 hours to learn to do something that this is going to take me 20 minutes? Can I learn to do something quickly and easily? Do I see how I can make use of this tool? Right? It's the way it is. Okay, look. What I'm going to do is start to talk about books. Now, firstly, I'm going to just show you this quick film. Now, I hope the subtitles work, because if they don't, none of us are going to understand this, because this film's in Norwegian. Okay? But it is quite good. So let's just watch this, because I'm going to show you some examples in a bit, some photographs I have from books. I said the book was a technology, and the book is very definitely a technology. It is a technology that people have adapted and learned to make and to use in various different ways over the years, and I will talk about some of this. But let's just start with this quick film. This is like 2.5 minutes, and it is quite good. All right. Don't tell me I can't make it. Okay, we laugh, and they are taking the mickey slightly, but some of the things that they were talking about are actually true. Right, so some photos. I got interested in the medieval book. I am now in. This is something I'm looking at. I think it is interesting to look at the ways that information practice is evident in the ways that these books were made, and particularly the ways they were used. I mean, I could go on about this for hours right now, but I'm not going to. Okay, but what you have to realize is that, you know, books were a technology that people had to learn to make and had to learn to use, and had to learn to make them in ways that were economical and effective, that, you know, transmitted the information from book to book. When you were handwriting books, before print, books were being, you know, written by hand. This is a complicated process that involved lots of stages. These monks that you see, they didn't go down to the nearest shop with their 5 groats and buy a nice blank book so they could come home and start writing it like we might do now. For a start, you had to make the book from scratch. You know, books were made of parchment, not paper. Do you know what parchment actually is? No, it's not made of wood. Parchment? No, it's skin. Right, calf skin usually. Okay, so you had to skin the calf, you had to tan it, you had to, you know, treat it, you had to stretch it. This was expensive stuff, and, you know, it couldn't be wasted. All right, so parchment was often used and reused, and some very famous scripts, some very famous texts actually only exist sometimes as bindings for other books. They were kind of found because the parchment had been reused, you know, to bind another book. Okay, so it would be scraped off, the ink would be scraped off and written on again and again and again. Really expensive and prestigious books like the Lindisfarne Gospels, or this is, do I have a picture? I haven't got a picture of the Lindisfarne Gospels. No, I don't actually. Okay, the Lindisfarne Gospels is a very, very beautiful book, huge book as well. And it was made of unborn calf vellum. How you go about getting the skin of an unborn calf, I don't even really want to think about. Okay, but that's the softest and most prestigious material. Parchment, though, is expensive and valuable. Okay, and of course it took time. It took a lot of time to copy a book. Because, you know, books were written, yes, new books appeared, okay, during the medieval era, but yeah, it was very rare for somebody to actually sit down and write a book in the way that, you know, I might do it to some extent, right? And even the books that I've written, I've still needed, you know, a technological device and a printer and a publisher and indeed an editor and a proofreader, okay? But an author of a book in the medieval era might have written it. There were some people who did both jobs, but usually you would be dictating it, all right? And the author would be, or the, you know, a scribe would write down the words of a famous speaker, or a book that you see here. And the technical term for a book that we might use now is actually a codex, all right? So a single codex or book might have various different texts in it. It might be a compilation because, again, parchment was expensive. Libraries, there wasn't a lot of space in them, and, you know, books were heavy and expensive and difficult to carry around, particularly if they were over a certain size. So a single codex might contain many different texts, and you had to find your way around this, right? You had to find your way around this. Now, without even going into the question of illumination, right? This is an amazing book. Right, this is called the McDurnan Gospels. This book I saw last summer. This book was created in about 750 AD. Okay, So that makes it about 1,300 years old, and it was beautiful. It was a lovely book. For a start, what you will see in the writing, it's all in Latin, by the way. But for a start, there's a lot of, I mean, it's not very big. You can see the size of the finger there. But there is a lot of space around that. Okay? Now, I've already said, oh, parchment was really expensive and valuable. So why leave all this blank space? Well, we go on a bit. That's my pictures of London. What you see there, and again, don't try and interpret it. I don't understand it. But what you see there was probably written anything up to 100 to 200 years after that. Okay? Not just 2 years, but possibly centuries after. Okay? And those are marginal notes. So it's what's called a gloss. You know, it's a commentary. Can you see here as well? You see that? You see my cursor there? You see my cursor? No. All right, you see the blue. You see the blue and red letters there? You see the blue letter, right? You see below it, there's a little note between the two lines, right? People used to do this kind of thing and still do. You're not supposed to do it. Technically, the library should tell you off if you write in books, but I do it all the time. I like reading other people's notes as well. I think it's great. Seriously, I like seeing what other people thought was interesting, and this is partly the point here. Do you see the little hand? You see the little hand at the top between the two columns? This is somebody going, look here, look at this thing. Seriously, it's called a diaper, right? And it's what people used to do. People learned to do this kind of thing. So not only, did it become acceptable to put this little thing on and say, I'm telling you what's interesting here. I'm giving you a commentary, an annotation of this bit of learning. But you had to be able to read that, and this is this idea of developing what I would now call information literacy or technological literacy. People became familiar with the signs and the symbols that said, look, here's something interesting, this scholarship that developed over time, and these various different ways that people introduced of telling somebody else what's interesting in the book, what's useful about this book, to make it useful. People, when they first wrote things down, I don't have any pictures of this, but when you first wrote things down, because so few people could publishing a book was not something done so people could put their feet up at the end of a hard day's slaving in the brewery or whatever of the monastery and go, oh yeah, the latest novel from the Venerable Bede's out. You didn't do that kind of thing. Books were there to transmit information, and if you couldn't really read, certainly there was very few people read books out loud, except in prayer, which is different. But, you didn't need spaces between the words. A lot of early books don't have spaces between the words because you didn't need them. Okay? But as more and more people started to do that, you've got spaces between the words, you can see them in. Okay? I mean, here, the spaces are marked with little dots. And some of these are really not, they're just abbreviations. So, people had to learn the abbreviations as well at this time. Look, people annotated books for all sorts of reasons. Right, I know this is a little out of focus, but this was the best thing that I saw when I went on this course last year, right? This is a book of hours. A book of hours is like a religious prayer book, but not for priests. A book of hours is the kind of thing that you would carry around with you if you were a noble or a lord and you wanted to it was like a status symbol. It was like a file of fax for the 80s or, your posh phone now. You should have a book of hours. And a book of hours was basically gave you the prayers that you were supposed to say at particular times of day, hence the book of hours, right? And it would also give you a calendar. What you're seeing here is the calendar at the front of the book, okay? Now, again, thinking about all of these ways in which a book like this is made useful to people. You had to be able to find your way around these prayers. If you just simply got a book full of prayers, big deal. The point was to help you work out which prayers you should be saying at which particular times of day, and indeed which days of the year. So you would have a calendar at the front of the Book of Hours, which this is, right? This is those initials you see there are the names of the days of the week, I think, and that's the whatever. Some of them are in red because the red days are special days. They are feast days or festivals or saints' days. Hence the phrase in English, red letter day. You have heard this phrase? A red letter day is an important and prestigious day. You know, or sometimes a dangerous day, you know, a significant day. Anyway, it comes from this phrase. This book of hours was owned by King Richard III. Okay? So again, as in Shakespeare, Richard III, he was supposed to be a sort of evil king. Although like with many, you know, I was amazed when I actually found out. If you think that the British royal family has been this sort of unbroken progression, by the way, for hundreds of years leading to, as he is now, King Charles III, that's not true. Kings were slaughtered and bumped off and imprisoned in castles and starved to death and killed with red-hot pokers and stuff like that, trust me. And King Richard III was, I believe, the last English king to die in battle, leading his troops in 1483. Anyway, he was considered something of an evil chap, but perhaps his reputation was undeserved. And anyway, Shakespeare wrote about him. This was King Richard III's Book of Hours. That writing that you see there says in Latin, on this day was born King Richard III in Fotheringay, Yorkshire. King Richard III has written his birthday in his diary. I love it. He's got his calendar and he said, this is my birthday. I'm writing my birthday. This is actually what it is. I love it. So yeah, you know, you could annotate books, you can write on them, you can personalise them. You can have some really quite remarkably beautiful illustrations like that one. Have I got the one of the guys in bed? I'll come back to that table of contents in a minute, but no, I thought I'd kept the one of the guys in bed, but I don't. Going back to this one, however, this is where it starts to get interesting. So in all of this blank space, which people might have written their notes in and stuff like that. Now I would not have known what that was had not the Professor Michelle Brown, who taught us and really did know absolutely everything about everything that had happened in Europe before about 1400. And I mean everything. This woman knew everything. And so she explained what these were. These are the Gospels, like I said, the McDernan Gospels, right? Now, again, I'm no Christian expert here, but the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a lot of them are sort of they're four versions of the same story. They're like reboots, you know, or remakes of the biblical or Christ's story, right? So some tales, like, I don't know, the feeding of the 5,000 or whatever, some of them appear in more than one gospel, right? Some of them appear in only one gospel. Some of them appear in all of them. Some of them appear in maybe two or three of them. What you see here is a medieval, well, actually not even medieval. This is like 750 AD. This is a cross-reference. It's like a footnote, right? So this whole idea of the academic footnote starts here. What this is actually saying, I'll easier for me to look on the screen so I get it right. Yeah, if you look at the top box, we must be looking at John here, because what you see at the top, if you look and ignore the little number, well, the little number 2 at the top, you see it looks like an M and a T with a line over it, and then an L, right? M and the T is Matthew. The L is Roman numeral 50, verse 50 of Matthew, or chapter 50 of Matthew. Similarly, Mark, chapter 41. No, it's not chapter 41, it's chapter, no, it is, 41, chapter 41. Luke, chapter 56. Okay? The same story that we are looking at here, the same bit of the gospel, is cross-referenced to say this also appears in Matthew chapter 50, Mark chapter 41, Luke chapter 61. Okay? People wanted to find their way around things. And what you see here, what time is it? Right, I'm nearly done. What you see here is one of the earliest tables of contents that existed. Now, look, how we use information is something else that has evolved over time, and it evolved for these guys too. We are talking hundreds of years here. Okay, but over a long period of time, scholarship changed. Around, well, when the McDurnan Gospels was written, and pretty much it all, throughout human history up until about 1000, towards the end of the 11th century. So about kind of 1080, I think, the first university was founded. But until there were any universities, people did their scholarship in monasteries. That's what you did. You were a monk. You might have, I suppose, had a non-religious outlook, but if you wanted access to the knowledge of the world, you needed to at least profess a religious outlook and get into a monastery one way or the other. And the way that people used to study these great works is that they would do what's literally called meditatio, which is from where we get the word meditation, the Latin word for a particular style of learning. And it really did mean to sit and engage yourself with one book for a very long period of time. You would study that book in its immensity, everything about it. You would meditate on that one book, right? But things changed when the universities began. The first university in the world. Does anybody know what country had the first university in the world? And it's not Britain. We're the second. Sorry? It is Italy. Do you know which one it was? Well done. Bologna. The University of Bologna in Italy is the world's oldest surviving university, 1080, I think. Oxford is second, about 11 something. Okay? When these universities opened, the style of scholarship changed. You, instead of looking at one book for a long period of time, you did pretty much what we're asking you to do now, which is look at a lot of them. Synthesize knowledge from a number of different books. And this was called lectio, right? But it's, sort of the origin of modern scholasticism. The point is that you needed, therefore, to get access to the information in that book more quickly than you did before. To simply have, worked through the entirety of the book, hoping that, eventually you would find the bit you wanted, because that is what you were doing. You were here to spend a year reading this book, You didn't need instant access to information. Unless in the past you were a priest, which is why you had that cross-reference earlier, because if you wanted to put together your sermon, you wanted to find out who all the different stories of the Gospels were, which is part of this. But once you get to the stage where you're looking at lots of different books, you need information quickly. This table of contents, which is what it is, was added to that book, again, about 200 years after that book was first written. Somebody wrote out a table of contents and bound it into the book at the front, whereas previously they hadn't been one. Because they decided that the table of contents would make that book more useful. As simple as that. A way of navigating around the information that is within this book. Illustrations like this, which is another book of ours. In fact, it might even be Richard III's book of ours again. I forget. Also, bearing in mind that a lot of people couldn't read. They might not be completely illiterate, but they would struggle. Images helped. And what you actually have here is the pictures of, well, firstly, you've got Capricorn on the right-hand side, right? That's Capricorn, so that's a zodiacal sign, saying this is the sign of the zodiac for this month. What should you do when it's Capricorn? You should slaughter your hogs. Kill those pigs, man. Fry them, preserve them, salt them, get on with it. Little pictures would guide people through the story. Illustrations developed to help people who couldn't read. I showed you 2 weeks ago the Mappa Mundi, similar idea, all of the illustrations and the text on the map working together to help guide people who could not read. So illustration, it's not just something that makes a book look pretty, but it's something that might help you understand the information within it and navigate your way through it. I think that would do. Oh yeah, early musical notation as well, by the way. There you go. Okay, look, time to take just a couple of minutes. We will begin this task of looking at books. So look, guys, it's just a couple of minutes. Take a breath, okay? Get your books out. If you've got books, get them out. Okay, I did try and remind people to bring a book, so please get out your book. Okay, look, just to sum up some of the things I was just saying just now and some of the things that come out of the video. So that's that picture of the table of contents again. Look, we laugh at the two Norwegian monks for saying, oh, I need a guide. I need a guide to the other book. You know, how do I use this book? I have to have a guide to it. But this is actually what this is. You know, this is a real life example of a guide for the user. That's what a table of contents is. Okay? None of these things are unique and innate to the book. Okay? I am hoping that in the room there will be books that have page numbers and books that do not. There will be books that have page numbers but don't need them. Think about this. Just hold these thoughts in your mind. Do you need page numbers in every book that has page numbers? Most of these books didn't have page numbers. Page numbers were pretty late development. Alphabetization, alphabetical order. Look, most of you are Chinese. You don't have an alphabet. Well, you don't. You have a script. It's different. You don't have an alphabet. I have no idea how you arrange things in your dictionaries, but it must be certainly not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, etc. Right? The alphabet is a completely arbitrary order. Why is the alphabet in the order that it is? I don't know. I'm going to do my party trick now. I bet you I can say the alphabet backwards just as quickly as you can say it forwards. Okay, here we go. Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, V, A. But it doesn't be. And I'm right too. I didn't miss any letters, trust me. Look, the alphabet is a completely random order of stuff, right? But it is an order that we are all familiar with, largely. Give me a bit. Stop relaxing for a minute. Let me just do this bit. The alphabet is not an order that is somehow natural or innate or correct. Okay? It is an order that has developed over a long period of time. And the first scribes who used it, the first recorded book to be created in what you might call alphabetical order came in about 1100, okay? And it was such a new and radical thing that when subsequent people copied it, they didn't understand the point about alphabetical order, so they didn't copy the order. And it was lost again for a while before it kind of came back in about 1200, 1300. Okay? People didn't want things in alphabetical order in the past. They wanted things in logical order, right? Or chronological order. Like, the Bible, at least the Old Testament, is in essence in chronological order. Genesis, Exodus, the other ones, Leviticus. Right? This is the story of the Jews, essentially, in chronological order. People would discuss things in logical order. If you used alphabetical order, you were seen as a bit of an ignoramus, because you were seen as admitting to everyone else that you didn't understand the logical structure of the argument and points that you were making. So putting everything in alphabetical order was seen as somehow ignorant, because it was a cop-out. And you didn't have to think about the logical order of things. You could do it in alphabetical order. Now we use them. Now we're familiar with it. Some of your books will be, I'm assuming, in alphabetical order. I know one of mine is anyway. Okay? So, this is why we're here. Look, please do really try to take this task seriously, right? Don't just have a cursory look at the book. Oh yeah, it's a book. Put it down and do WeChat for the next 20 minutes, all right? In fact, guys, we'll make this a no laptop zone, okay, for a bit, all right? At least the next 15 minutes, please, no laptops. That's everybody who's now got their laptops up. No laptops. Down with the laptops. Come on, we're looking at a book. We are getting into technology that is here in the room, that is tangible and solid. We will look at these books. Guys, there are many, many books in the room, and while I realize you do not want to lose any books, no one's going to walk out with your books, I'm sure. It will be good if we could get some of these books circulating and moving around. We will find them again at the end. You don't have to let your book get way away from you. I've got 3 that I'm just going to hand out. Have a look at those as well. Okay? Please, really consider this task seriously. Look at the affordances of the different books that you have. There are really, if you like, two different types of affordances going on here. Firstly, can you put your screen down? Please put your screen down. Thank you. And up there, could you put your screen down, please? Yep, that's you. Thank you. And at the back, screen down, please. Thank you. Screens down, please. Just, you don't need them for the next 15 minutes, at least. Look at all of the books as a set, right? Because books, you know, if I'd asked you to bring in a scroll, or bring in a phone or a TV, this is a different medium. The book, all of these books have certain things in common. That's why we call them books, okay? So think about, firstly, what is the affordance of every book? What does every book, what kind of behaviours does it make possible? What can you do with these books that you can't do with certain other file formats? And if you're not thinking of anything now, talk to people in the room about this. Look at the book, feel the book, consider the book, reflect on the book. What behaviours does a book make possible? What can you do with a book? All the books, okay? There are things that every book in the room has in common with every other book that are innate to it as a file format, if you like. But then have a think about the different types of book that are in the room, okay? I mean, if you end up in an area where everybody's brought a novel, then, you know, use one of mine to look at a different type of book. Okay, think about what different types of book there are, whether they're in Chinese or English or Javanese or whatever, you know. Think about the different types of book and how these books are made useful to you as a user of the information that is in that book. Does that make sense? Right? Every one of these books will be helping you navigate your way around this. Okay? So look at the books, talk to each other about the books, including Alex. You involve Alex in this, okay? Right, you guys at the top. He's part of your group. Right, so like I said, just, you know, you don't have to form a formal group, but just, you know, look at the books around you, okay? I am going to pass out 3 books and I want these back, particularly Watchmen. This is one of the greatest books ever written, by the way, but it's unusual. You will see why. Okay, so please really look at books, really feel them, think about them. Look at the ways that information is organised in them. Step back and think, is this book useful to me and why? Okay, not because of the content of the book, but because of the way it's designed. And I'm going to get a cup of tea. I will be back in 5 minutes. Okay, guys, remember 2 things. What is similar to all of these books and what is particular to different types of book. And if you really feel that you've had enough of the books that you've got, swap them around, right? Circulate the books. There are many different types of book in the room, I hope. Move them around, swap them. Look at different types of books, right? Look at lots of different types of books. This is a very active task. Please be active. Okay? Talk to each other. Is this book useful? Try to use the book. Okay? Try to find something in the book. So, for example, how would you find stuff in that book? Yeah, but how would you use it? Okay, there are 2 different ways that you could use the information in that book, right? If I wanted to say to you, find where's the, you know, how would you get from a particular place? Guys, talk to this group. Right, how would you use the information in that book? Have you looked at it? Yeah, okay. I mean, different ways that you could use the information. If you want to find a particular street, there it is. Oh, that's the code for the yeah, that's the code. Yeah. Okay. Try and find it. Guys, please pass the books around. Get lots of different books. Look at books. Fly the book around. Okay. Try and use the book. So I think that's a great novel, right? That is a great novel, right? But what's unusual about it as a novel? Yeah, it's a picture. It's a graphic novel, right? Books put lots of different types of information in books. Okay, doesn't have to be words. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So have a look at the other books around. You've only got that one. What other books you can find? And cast Watchmen back. Think about the ways that you might make a book more useful to yourself. Guys in the middle there, you've seen book 3. Do you have a book? Are you looking at a book? Right, no, that's not a book. That's something on a screen. Books on screens do not count. We are looking at paper books. You don't have one. Right, get a book. Right, get a book. Look, guys, you don't have to stop talking. Pass the books around. Look at books. Feel the book. Embrace the book. Think about the book. If you're bored with your current book, get a new book. That's on the very few novels on the index. But it's in the third volume. Look, I'm not really appreciate I had page on, and then that's right. We've had another book that's not designed to be read from start to finish. Yes. So you have a book that is not designed to be read from start to finish. What kind of book we got? Okay, so you might just read individual poems. Right? So maybe you've got a kind of book where you are finding information inside. Where's my metro book? My map book. Yeah, okay. Look at the maps in that book. Tell me as well also, talk to each other about what about the maps in that book? Are they easy to use? Why are they easy to use? Why is a metro map easy to use? Okay? Metro maps are not like normal maps. They are different. Okay? With that book, okay. Don't you look at it. Try and think about how you would use that book. Okay, how would you use that book? What helps you use that book? Books, not phones. Talk about how you would use a book. How do you read a book? How do you find where you were finishing the book the night before? Okay, look, I'll tell you what. Let's bring this to an end, but make sure you get your books back. Okay. My 3 books, you can keep them for now, but just pass the books back to where you got them from, and then we'll talk about them. Okay, please, if you did that task actively, you should have answers to some of these questions, or at least opinions about them. So, what is common to all of these books, really? Let's just start with the basics. What is shared by every book in this room?
Get information.
They are sources of information, yes?
They open.
Yeah. No. It matters. No, it matters. They are information sources. They think of this as a file format. Okay, but it is a file format that has particular features. For a start, the book can be open or closed. Okay, this matters. A book can be open or closed. So, what does every book have that allows you to close it? For example, a cover. Look at your book covers. Does anybody have any books with a completely blank cover? I am serious. There will be some. Right, you have one. That is a library book. There's one. They are probably blank for one of two reasons. One is that they will have been rebound. Yeah, I got it. They would have been rebound by the library at some point, or they will have had a dust jacket that has been lost. Yeah, I'm going to show you a film in a minute, and you'll see an example of this. Okay? But what is common to all of the others is that the covers are not blank. There are things written on the covers. So what is on the cover of these books? The title. The author. Yeah, some publication information, yes. On the back, there will probably be a blurb or an abstract of the book.
Yeah.
Right? Why are these things there? Why put that information on the book? To attract people to buy it, to also help them decide whether they want to get it off the library shelf and whether it's worth their time. It's an abstract. It's a summary of the book. Yeah? So, the books have information on them to make it more useful. I will show you the examples of this that I put on my little film in a minute. Okay? Books also have another thing in common. They don't just have a cover. What's inside the book physically? No, not words. Physically, what is it made of? What is a book comprised of? What do these books have? Pages. Pages. They have pages. A book is made of a number of pages. Look, these medieval books that we were looking at. Okay. Again, you don't chop up a skin, a parchment into these pages and then file them individually. You fold the page. You fold the parchment. And you create what's called a quire. Guys, listen up. This is actually relevant and interesting. Yes, thank you. You have what's called a quire. A quire is a number of sheets, usually 8. You then cut them and you fold them and you bind them separately inside the books. Okay? Different quires were often given to different scribes. And one of the ways that medieval scholars work out who wrote what is by looking at whether the handwriting changes. And often you see books where every 8 pages the handwriting changes, because they farmed out the job of writing it to several different scribes and each one of them got a quire. Right? So the idea of a page is something that's developed over time, but is not necessarily natural. People didn't used to number pages. But you can do various things with every book simply because it's created as part of pages. Now, I was saying to one of you guys up here, how do you know? Yeah, it was you, I remember. How do you know? You gave me 2 ways you would do this. How do you know where to pick up a book again that you had to finish the night before to go to sleep? What was your first one first? Yeah, okay. So we asked the question, does every book need page numbers? Okay. Some of you had novels, right? You had novels, right? Does a novel really need a page numbers? Someone said, yeah, you think it does. Yeah? There's no right answer or wrong answer, okay? You would do what she did, remember the page number where you were? Yeah? And you would remember the page number. Yeah? I wouldn't have the slightest idea what page number I was on. I would put a bookmark in. Okay? But you can do that with a book. Okay? You can get a little bookmark. Never turn the corners over. I might write in books, but turning the corners over, that's immediate death. Okay? Execution. Okay? Put a bookmark in, and you know where you were. Okay? You can do that with a book. It's actually easier to do that with a book than it is with, I know now that our computers will open up files where we were before, but, this doesn't always make it easy to jump between books, to move constantly from one part of a file to another part of a file. It's actually easier to do that with a book. Okay, so we can put bookmarks in. And look, why are we saying that novels don't necessarily need page numbers? Because how is a novel read? We talked about this. How do you typically read a novel? Yeah, but how do you read it? Do you start halfway through? You would start to finish, right?
Yeah.
There are plenty of books in this room that are designed to be read from start to finish. Okay? But there are lots of types of books in this room that are not designed to be read from start to finish. If you've got a book that's not designed to be read from start to finish, in your opinion, hold it up. Okay? So is that really it? Come on, guys. Have you got books that are not designed to be read from start to finish? There was someone over here, at least, we talked about a book. Hold it up. Thank you. So we've got study skills books. What's that one at the back? What's that book at the back? Right, so it's a textbook.
Yeah, starting textbook.
A textbook. What have we got there? The Bible, yes. I recognise that. I've seen one of those before. Yeah, a dictionary. Right, let's take the dictionary. Okay, let's take the dictionary. We have a dictionary here. Is it German English? Is it German Spanish? Wow, you have many languages. Okay, so look, I don't know what is the Spanish word for fenster? I know that German. What's the Spanish word for fenster? Tell me how you would find that in the book. In the book. Right. So how are you finding my bad German? I got that German word right. Right. So that's not alphabetical. That's not an alphabetically ordered. Ah, interesting. Interesting. Right. Listen up. Okay. So we have a dictionary, phrase book. Now, I just asked Claudia a question here. I said, because I thought it was organized alphabetically. Okay. Fenster is a German word for window, right? I'm right there. Yeah, right. Okay. I did do German O level, but it was a while ago. I thought you were going to be able to look and go to F, right? But that is organized by category, okay? Not alphabetically. So maybe it's less useful for a query like that, but maybe it's more useful if you want to actually go to Spain and order a beer or get a hotel room, right? Yeah, okay, so it's a phrase book rather than a dictionary. Does anybody have a book that is organized alphabetically? What? Okay, alphabetically?
Yeah, this is the Cambridge Dictionary for grammar.
Okay, cool. How does that work then? Seriously, how would I use that? How would you use it?
Yeah, every page it has the word at the corner. So the word at the left corner indicate that the first section of the left page is about that word.
Yeah. Okay.
And on the right side, we also have the word on the corner, but it indicates the last word that we have on that page.
Okay. I get it, I think. But no, okay, but look, there is a system in the book. The book is not just a random series of words, right? It is not just a random series of concepts or events. It is an organized structure of finding the information that is in this. Look, dragging this back to educational digital technologies for a moment, I hope that you at least find my Blackboard site reasonably okay to navigate. Okay, I hope that you can at least follow the chronology of the weeks and the blocks. It's arranged in chronological order. My site, that's how it is. Okay, and there is a top level of the hierarchy that is the blocks, and then within each block there are the weeks, and that's how it is. Okay, so there is an organizational system in place here. You know, Claudia's dictionary or phrasebook is organized categorically, right, by category, but not by alphabet. You've got the book that is organized by alphabet. Right. Okay. Now, not all of the information in these books either is textual. There are plenty of books here with illustrations of various kinds. Even that textbook has illustrations in it. Am I right? Hello. The textbook that we were looking at earlier, they got pictures in it. Yeah, and diagrams, graphs, charts, and so on. Right. Where's Watchmen? Watchmen's still up there. Right. Look, hold Watchmen up. Look at this. Look at that book. That really is one of the greatest novels ever written, and if you've never read it or even seen the movie, you really should, although the movie's got one really grim bit in it that I can't watch. Right, when you see the guy walking up with a chainsaw, my advice is to close your eyes for 10 seconds. But what is unusual about that book, in terms of it being a novel, what is unusual about that book? Tell everybody. Right, that is a graphic novel. Okay, that is a graphic novel. That novel is told mostly by pictures. Not all of it, though, right? I mean, if you flick through, if you're not aware, that if you flick through that, you will see that there are some passages of the book that are text. They are words. Okay, which is one reason why it's such a good book. Really, it's work of genius, that book. Okay, you had the history of comic books up there. Are there any other books where the visual is important? Does anybody have any books of photographs, for instance? Okay, what we got there? What's that? It's a comic, right? Okay. A manga, is that? Is that manga? Yeah, it looks like manga, right? Okay. Okay, so you have there, I mean, are there any photo books, for instance, or books of pictures? Yeah. Okay, yeah, we had Lord of the Rings, right? Okay, Peter Rabbit, yeah, Beatrix Potter's illustrations. We had hold it up so people can see. Not to me, I know what's in the book. Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has maps, lots of maps. Lord of the Rings is interesting because Lord of the Rings is one of the very, very few novels I have ever encountered that has an index. Okay? But at the end of volume 3 of Lord of the Rings, there is an index. I assume they still print the index in the modern volumes. I hope they do, because it's all right. But most of the time, you don't need to find your way through a novel because you're doing it from start to finish. But if you've got a book that you need to jump into it, okay? If you've got a book that you need to jump into, it matters. Are you showing, Claudia, you showing me that because of the pictures? Yeah, okay. So Claudia's, show everyone else. Okay, so we've got a phrase book here, but one that has organized partly around pictures and so on. That's quite interesting. Okay, textbooks, chapters in books. If you're not planning to read the whole of an academic book, but you just want to know one chapter, there are different ways of finding it. You would find it by looking at the table of contents, but you might also look at the back where there's an index. Now, what is the difference between a table of contents and an index? Because there are differences. We got an academic book near you, or a reference book, right? Does it have both a table of contents at the front and an index at the back? Okay. If I want you to find what page does chapter 5 begin on, which one of the two would you look at? Table of contents. If I was to ask you which page does the idea of postmodernism appear on? Right, two different things, right? Two different pointers to the same information. Okay, where did the A to Z of Manchester go? It was round here. The Manchester guidebook, the map of Manchester. Yep, thank you. Right. Now, look, this is pretty old-fashioned. Nobody uses these anymore, right? But I still have this hanging around in my office. Look, this is a road map of the whole of Manchester, really, okay? You know, nothing. You wouldn't Google map now, would you? But look, this is an atlas. Think of this as an atlas. I would bet you every atlas still looks like this. I've got atlases at home, but they're too big, so I didn't bring them in. But look, you know, if I want to find the information in here, I would do it in two different ways, depending on how I was going to use it. Okay? Because at the front, there is, I mean, I know you can't see that from anywhere near the back, but that's a kind of summary of all of the pages. So if I want to go from this bit of Manchester, which is kind of Bolton, you know, say I wanted to go from Bolton to, I don't know, Rochdale. Bolton's there, Rochdale's there, right? If I wanted to do that drive, I would know that these pages, Bolton's kind of page 32 to 33 and Rochdale's kind of pages 26 to 27. And, you know, I could turn, let's just do Bolton because I found it first. There you go. I'm looking at Bolton, right? And if I wanted to do the journey using this book, that's how I would start by that. But if I wanted to find a particular street, okay, say I wanted to find the very wonderfully named Whitworth Street, which is, of course, named after me, I would go, right, where am I? Okay, Whitworth Close. There you go. I didn't know there was one of those. 1A 100. What I'm looking at now is the gazetteer at the back, okay? This is an alphabetical index to all of the streets that appear in this atlas, right? This would be absolutely no use to me if I wanted to drive from Bolton to Rochdale, okay? But if I want to find a specific street in Rochdale or Ashton or wherever, I've got another index. I've got another way of organising the material. So I've got page 100, 1A, and I've got, here the page numbers are really important. I've got page 100 and 1A, you know, 1A, right? There is a system for pointing me to the right information in this book. And if I want to find a particular street, it's much easier to do it through the index at the back than the table of contents at the front. But if I want to find more general information, in this case, how to do a broader journey, I would probably go to the map at the front, or as we've already said, you would find the chapter that you needed from this book at the front. right? Different ways of organizing the information to point people to the right direction. Now, I've got one more film to show you, but we'll finish off with this because when it was COVID year and I couldn't do this class, I got my son to put this together. His camera work is a bit odd at times, and there are points when you're kind of looking at my hands rather than me. But look, some points to summarize what we've been talking about here, okay?
Hello, everybody. In this film, I want to give you an introduction to a very familiar technology. Indeed, it's so familiar that you might not even think
You get to look at my bedroom.
But it's been around for hundreds of years, and despite frequent claims that we'll soon never see them anymore, millions of these are still made every year. And it is the book. I want to think about some features of the book as a file format, if you like. I want to talk about things that books have in common, and I want you to think and remember the idea of affordance, the idea that people use technologies because they are useful. So let's ask, what makes a book useful? Okay, firstly, books come in all different sizes. You've got 3 here, ranging from this booklet with 32 pages, this short novel, which is 169 pages, and then probably the biggest book, single book I have, Stephen King's The Standard, 1,325 pages. The thing is though, as soon as you look at a book, you know how long it's going to take you to read. No one is going to pick up the stand and imagine they're going to finish it in 2 days.
Like, that's an interesting book.
Books are fairly cheap.
How big the book is.
And they're fairly durable. I bought this copy, this is one of my favourite novels. I bought this copy of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at a gas station in Pennsylvania, USA in 1989, and I'm sure I paid about $2.50 for it. And okay, it's a bit battered, but it's still very readable. This is not a file format that's going to go obsolete, and I must have read this book 20 times for my $2.50. That's good value. Talking of durability, this is the oldest book I own. At the bottom of the front page here, you can see it's printed in 1751, I believe that is. But yes, it's still quite readable with some beautiful pictures, even if it does. As you might see there, green X instead of X's. So, a little old-fashioned, but we can still use it. Now, let me ask you, would you do this with your laptop? Then again, I wouldn't drop a book into a bath full of water. But then again, I wouldn't drop a laptop into a bath full of water either. And books are heavy, particularly when you've got a lot of them. They take up a lot of storage space too, I believe them. They have developed over time some adaptations to the format to help with this. You can see how these books have their important summary information, the author and the title, on the spine, which means that it's displayed when the books are stored on these shelves in the motive.
That is an important point. Let me just stress this because I didn't say this when we were doing this. Look, I bet even that book that doesn't have anything on the cover has something on the spine, right? The blank, yeah? Yeah, okay. Precisely so you can store them like this. Okay? I mean, if you had no information on the spine and all the information was on the cover, if you were to find the books on the shelves, you'd have to display them with their covers out. This would be highly inefficient. Much less efficient than doing it like this. This is why, books have this on the cover. And incidentally, while we're here, and yes, I do like Stephen King. I think he's a remarkably good author, actually, and highly underrated. But, once you get a really famous author, you will generally see that their names on the cover are the big thing, because you want to read a Stephen King book. You don't care what it's called. Nobody's heard of you, like Andrew Whitworth's books don't have Whitworth in big letters on the spine, trust me. All right, because nobody cares about who wrote that book, right? But you would, the different ways that you have of advertising and marketing and displaying the book.
Most efficient way, which is slide on. Going back to my 1751 book, you can see that there's no information on the cover and very little on the spine. In fact, this has been rebound that gives you any information about the book. You usually, with newer books, you will, though, see pictures on the cover, names of the author, intended to make us want to buy it, because we like the previous work. This actually, however, on this particular book comes on what's called a dust jacket, which protects the cover of the book though by itself, as you can see, getting a little tatty. Paperback books though will usually now have information on the back. You call this a blurb or like an abstract, and the idea is that you can find out what's inside the book without having to go through it. And this makes the book far more useful. So that's the outside of the book taken care of. Now let's look inside the book. What can you do with the features of this technology to make the book more useful to use? For a start, regardless of whether the contents of a book are divided up into chapters, every book is, of course, divided up simply by the fact that it has pages. This allows several other ways of making the book useful. For a start, the reader can put a marker in between two pages so they know exactly how far they read to last time. You can number the pages. This is very common. And numbering the pages allows you to let the reader know how the book is divided up into chapters. You could put a table of contents with page numbers, and you can also let them know where particular subjects are discussed inside the book by including an index. Not every book needs this kind of arrangement, and sometimes books are arranged differently, as I will show you shortly. You could argue, for instance, that if you do have a novel, the page numbers are essentially irrelevant because it doesn't really matter what page particular things happen on. And I'm going to get you to think about this kind of thing in a later task. How do your books organise the information within them? There are different ways to organise information. Dictionaries will do it alphabetically. Travel guides like these will organise themselves regionally, both in terms of the whole series and the way that the advice within them is divided up region by region of these different countries. So they are organised around a geographical arrangement.
This is also arranged geographically. Atlases are arranged geographically.
Like this, in front of each map to show you exactly how each map relates to the maps on different pages. The information is being arranged geographically. Very good for this too. The Atlas is also an example of a book that contains far more than just text. This is a very famous graphic novel, told mostly by pictures with speech bubbles. And also, if I can find one, passages of text like that. The book can show a lot of different types of information. There are certain limitations to books, so of course a book can never answer your questions. If the information within it changes, then the book can't update itself.
Could I just say, look, remember that idea, right? There were also points about all of these different media that apply generally. You've got this idea of, are you able to interact with the content of the book, right, in various different ways? Now, some of your books will have things, particularly the textbooks. I imagine that they will have things like where it says stop and think, right? I have done this on Blackboard. You know, if you go through the Blackboard sites and things organized, there will be particular points where I'm saying, think about this, okay? Partly as the equivalent for the distance learners of things that we're doing in our class. But as we move on, and you will see this in block 3 when I talk about pedagogy, the different types of media that are out there allow or afford different kinds of interactions. As I said here, books are great, but they can't answer your questions. And if the information changes in them, then you need a second edition.
This book's Alfred Wainwright's Pictorial Guide to the Lake Landfill. It's very useful books for people like me who like to walk up mountains in the Lake District. Lots of good graphical information and textual information, but things change. And these books were first written in the 1950s and 1960s. What happened in the 2000s was, as you can see there, produce a second edition, and you can do this with books, of course. And the information was updated and changed, but the book can't do this itself. I needed to buy these second editions. It wasn't like my first edition updated itself. But nevertheless, despite this, as I said at the beginning, there's far too much information encoded into books and still being published in books for them to go obsolete anytime soon. What I'm going to ask you to do now is think about some books of your own. There's guidance in the teaching materials after this video, but I want you to have a look and think about how the...
We already did that and we're running out of time. So, okay, the book, I hope you realise now there's a lot more depth into it, and there's a lot of ways in which the book helps the user navigate around. Okay? At the very least, take this lesson forward into any later work that you do. You will look at Blackboard. You might think Blackboard is easy to get around. You might think it's difficult to get around. Think about how you might make the information on your Teams channel easier to get around. Okay? There are ways in which you can format the information. There are ways in which you can show that. For instance, you've got things like a heading. Don't underestimate the simple value of increasing the font size and saying, hey, I've got a heading. All of these things have been developing for 1,500 years. Okay? These are not things that were invented by Bill Gates in 1997. Okay? So what are these ways in which the technologies, our information technologies, help us navigate the information that they are providing to us is essential, and that is what makes them useful. Those are the behaviours that they afford. Look, we're out of time, but please, I will start the Friday class by looking at some of your learning environment maps, so please post them to Teams by the 20th, okay? There's no deadline as such, and but it would be nice to have a look at them on Friday morning. So, and be ready to talk about why. Remember, you should be putting things on your maps if you can say why it's there, okay? You can't think why it's there, don't map it. But yeah, we'll talk about the social shaping of technology because, as I said there, it's possible that a technology could afford many things in your learning environment, be really useful, but for whatever reason you might not be allowed to use it, or it might have damaging effects. And this is often politics. Does technology have politics? The answer is very definitely yes. And we will talk about that on Friday, and then use social media as a case study in week 5. And I've said that, and we're done. Okay. Please make sure you get your books back, and I want Watchmen back and my Metro Maths book back, please. Okay, so please return them. Okay, make sure you leave with all your books. Don't leave any books behind.